Good evening, ladies. I hope you are ready to dig in and dive into this next session. Today and tonight, we are going to be talking all about food, what things you should discontinue or maybe eliminate, what things maybe you should add in. Now, I want you to make sure that you keep an open mind, and I want you to just tune in for a moment and get your headspace right. And I know sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming, but remember, we're going to just do 2% better today than we did yesterday, and we'll do 2% better tomorrow than we did today. So just don't get overwhelmed. Take it at your pace. Don't get overwhelmed and not do anything. And don't just dive in and do everything. And as soon as you mess up, you give up. All right. So, the other thing I want to encourage you is nobody's making you do this. This is your choice. You are choosing to get better. You are choosing to get healthier. You are choosing to get happy, healthy, and lean. All right. So, also, if you took advantage of the testing, just hang tight if you haven't gotten a call. My ladies are working very hard to call you back. And if for some reason you haven't gotten at least one initial call, make sure that you check your email because sometimes you might accidentally put in a wrong number and we can't get a hold of you. So we email you to make sure that we get a hold of you. Okay. And we will be reaching out if for some reason there's a problem. We'll reach out in Facebook to make sure we get a hold of you. So don't worry, just hang tight if you haven't been called back. But my staff is working extremely hard to make sure that that happens. Everybody will be called back by the end of the week, by Friday, for sure. And if you haven't been called by Friday, please reach out to Rachel and we will make sure that we get you taken care of. Okay. So, without further ado, I am going to turn this over to a recording that I did previously. And I'm going to give you all the goods for what you need to start implementing starting tomorrow. All right, ladies, stay tuned and have a good evening. And I will drop another bonus session tomorrow at the same time. You're never going to be successful with your changing your eating. It's going to be something that you can do for a week, 2 weeks, 30 days max, and then you're going to fall off. Or you're going to feel deprived for 30 days, and then you're going to go back to your old eating habits. And things don't become a lifestyle. They become these fad diets, one diet after another. And we have success. For some of us have a lot of success when we're doing that. But as soon as we get off, we gain it all back. Same goes for people who even do gastric bypass or do any kind of gastric surgeries, whether it's the sleeve or the bypass or whatever. It's like you lose weight in the beginning, but because you haven't changed your thinking and because you haven't made a change in the lifestyle, you do all of the implementation for a certain time and then you go back to old habits. And before you know it, the weight's back. Right? So it's very important that we change our thinking before we change our eating. And then the other thing that I want to remind you about is your mindset. Remember, your subconscious mind responds to pictures that you see and the words that you say to yourself. And one of the things that you can do to let your subconscious mind know that you making a choice to change is not painful. And you have to make the choice to change. It is your choice. But if you instead say, I can't eat that, I mustn't have that, I am not allowed to eat that, then your subconscious mind goes into deprivation, pain, and you are going to fail. But instead, if you say, I'm making a choice not to have that, I'm choosing health, then your subconscious mind thinks of it completely different and your experience is going to be completely different. And I also want you to think about this as we get into the content today, that restricting some foods now frees you from other restrictions later. Think about that. So you may decide to cut out some foods after we go over it and after you understand where they come from and how the impact that they have on your body. And it's okay to restrict those foods. But you have to know that you're making a choice for health. and you're choosing to restrict those foods so that maybe you don't have restrictions later. I would much rather restrict some of the food that I'm eating than be restricted in mobility, than to be restricted in thought, right? To lose your brain, to be restricted, in any other way. Those are the two major things that I can think about: being restricted in mobility, whether it's from diabetes or an amputation or joint pain or, autoimmune issues, or is it being restricted in your thought and your comprehension and your cognition, right? So those restrictions those restrictions are way bigger to me than changing my diet and having a few restrictions now. So you got to think about it just in different ways. And we're going to talk more through that as we are getting through the content. But first of all, let's talk about the 3 fallacies of the weight loss industry. All right. So number 1 is to decrease calories. Well, first of all, I want to back up a little bit. First of all, you need to know, and we're going to talk a lot about weight tonight. And not all of you have an issue with weight. Not all of you need to release weight. And many of us are starting to change our thought processes, and we're really focusing on our body composition, which is much healthier. But for so many of you, a majority of you, you need to release weight. And that's all you think about, and that's all you focus on, and that's all you talk about, and that's all your self-talk is about, is how fat you are or how much weight you need to lose, or don't look in the mirror. But I want you to realize that weight is just a symptom. Right? Weight is a symptom. We have been taught that weight causes disease, right? If I would just lose the weight, the diabetes will go away. If I would just lose the weight, then my energy would come back. If I would just lose the weight, I could sleep better. And so it's really, really, really important that you understand and you make the shift that weight is not the cause. I have a gnat flying around. Weight is the symptom, right? And remember, when weight is a symptom, there must be a cause, right? So what are some of the causes that could create an increase in weight? Number 1, insulin resistance. But so many of us are taught, like, well, if you just lost the weight, then you would get rid of diabetes or insulin resistance, but that isn't true. Insulin resistance causes you to store fat, right? When your cells become resistant to insulin and you have all of this insulin surges, your body is storing fat. But it's the insulin resistance that's causing the weight. Other things that cause weight gain: hypoglycemia, when your blood sugar goes down. So when your blood sugar goes up or your blood sugar goes down, it doesn't matter. It causes you to store fat, because both of those instances cause you to release insulin, and insulin is a fat storing hormone. Also, when we have an elevation in cortisol, we talked about this a little bit on the first night, when you are under stress, when you're under fight or flight, your body is pumping out cortisol and you're going to gain weight around the midsection. So it's just like saying, well, just go lose the weight and your stress will go away. We all know that that's crazy, and you're never going to be successful doing that. We have to work on the stress, and whether it's the external stress and the way you respond to the stress, or maybe it's the internal stress that you're dealing with that we have to really work on. Either way, we've got to work on the cortisol levels in order for you to lose weight. Also, underlying infections, whether that's bacterial or viral. Also, heavy metal toxicity, biotoxin toxicity, estrogen dominance, increased testosterone, PCOS. All of these things cause you to gain weight. And so we have to remember, and I'm just saying this over and over because you've had like decades worth of, decades worth of the industry and doctors telling you that weight is the problem, but weight is not the problem. Weight is not the cause. There are underlying issues that cause the weight. I want you to think about being overweight as like having a headache. So a doctor will tell you, well, you just need to go lose the weight. That would be like saying you just need to go lose your headache. That doesn't make any kind of sense, right? So I want you to think about, if weight is a symptom, what's causing the symptom? And in order to figure out what's causing the symptom, you have to go down the blueprint. You have to say, okay, what are my goals? Do I have comprehensive testing? Do I have that testing analyzed so that I can have the right diagnosis, so I know what I'm working on, so that what I'm working on is actually going to work? And so the fallacies of this weight loss industry is they don't want you to realize or know that weight is just a symptom. What they want you to focus on is losing the weight. And so the biggest fallacy is that you need to decrease calories, right? So just decrease what you're eating. Decrease what you're eating. They don't tell you what to eat. They just say it doesn't matter what you eat. And I still hear Instagram workout people constantly saying it has nothing to do with what you eat. It is truly in, calories out, which is complete ridiculousness, right? I want you to think about this. If you ate 500 calories of a chicken breast and you ate 500 calories of chocolate chip cookies, do you think that's going to have the same nutritional content and impact on your body? I think anybody who really thought about that would say that there's no way, right? Like when you eat chicken breast, you don't really cause insulin surges. You don't really cause insulin resistance because of that. You don't start storing fat. When you eat a chicken breast, you break down all of those amino acids into energy and muscle building proteins. And so, it's important for you to realize that calories, in an instance, they do matter, right? Like you can overeat calories, although it would be very difficult for you to overeat calories if you're eating the right food. I've never seen someone say, oh my God, I just overate all of that chicken. I never heard anyone say, I just got started eating that trout and I just could not stop. So it doesn't work like that. But when you eat chocolate chip cookies, you can sit there and eat those mindlessly for hours and not get full and overeat those chocolate chip cookies. But what happens when you eat the chocolate chip cookies is completely different than what happens when you eat that animal protein that I was talking about. And so this is kind of like all the diet programs out there, like Weight Watchers, they have points, and those points are essentially based on calories. And you literally, because you're counting calories or you're counting points, you could not eat all day long, and then you could eat pizza and ice cream at night, and you would stay within your calories, and you would be on program, right? And you may even lose some weight in the beginning, but it won't last long because you're not changing your physiology. You are not addressing the underlying issues with the weight. You're just manipulating how many calories that you're eating, but that can't be a long-term solution. And it isn't healthy and it doesn't promote health, right? So calories are not the same. We have healthy calories and we have empty calories. And, so many of those weight loss programs focus on calorie restriction. Now, the next fallacy is that you have to increase your exercise. And I can't tell you how many people I see are like, Dr. Heather, I am exercising. I exercise like 5 days a week. I'm barely eating 1,000 calories and I am not losing weight at all. And why do I know this story so well is because, yes, I've seen thousands of patients, but I've been there and done that. And I have tried every diet on this planet. I mean, I've tried everything, the grapefruit diet, the tuna, fish, and crackers diet, the cabbage soup diet, slim fast. I mean, I've tried them all. I stopped dieting about 20 years ago. And I think that that's the biggest thing, right? I stopped dieting 20 years ago because I figured it out. And I figured out how to address the underlying root cause instead of trying to just manipulate calories and increase exercise, because we all know that doesn't really work. Now, some of you will increase your exercise and you will actually gain weight, which is so frustrating. And it's important to really understand that some of you aren't healthy enough to exercise. I said that, probably the only doctor that might ever tell you that, is many of you aren't healthy enough to exercise. Why? Because when you exercise, it puts such a stress on your body that it raises cortisol, it raises your blood sugar, and it causes you to be into a more sympathetic stress, and it'll cause you to gain weight. And it'll cause you, when you do exercise, you don't recover. when you exercise, you're down for about a week, right? So that's counterproductive. We have to start working underneath the surface before we start implementing exercise. And there is a way to exercise that really promotes health and allows you to gain muscle and increase your cardiovascular health and really increase your fat loss. So, and I can talk about that maybe as a bonus session, talk about, what we should be striving for when we are working out. But I will tell you a big clue is resistance training. And then also there is a very specific way to do cardio. And I have noticed that when I just lift weights and only do resistance training, that I'm not burning a ton of fat. But whenever I do zone 2 cardio training with resistance training, it's kind of the thing that works for me. And I will teach you what I mean by that. But just increasing your exercise and going crazy, exercising and doing, a lot of CrossFit or HIIT workouts or, super high intensity, a lot of times that causes more harm than good, causes way more cortisol output. And you know that you're over exercising if it takes you more than a day to recover. If you're wiped out for the entire day, you overdid it. And overtraining is a real thing. All right. Now, that doesn't mean you should sit on the couch all day. That I do think that we need to move our bodies, right? We need to walk. We need to get out in the sunshine. And we'll talk about this as we move forward. But you do need to get your body in motion, right? It doesn't mean that you can't do yoga or that you can't stretch or that you can't do Tai Chi. But high intensity working out is probably not for us women who have autoimmune issues and low thyroid, because it pushes beyond where we should be and causes extra stress, and it causes us to gain weight or inflammation. Now, the third fallacy of the weight loss industry is to cut out fat. Now, this is crazy because this whole fat-free era in the I think it was all through the 90s. I think I started going fat-free like mid-90s and when I was in college. And I remember as long as it's fat-free, it's good. So I would my roommates and I would buy Snackwells like cookies, and we literally would eat half a package of that a day. And, I would eat lots of candy, so Laffy Taffy and things like that, because it didn't have any fat. I would eat lots of baked potatoes because it was really low in fat. And then I wondered why in the world I was gaining weight. And why, when the world was I as big as a house? And it was because I had the wrong idea, because I was listening to the industry where they wanted us to go fat-free. And that whole era was based on a study that was completely fabricated. They did this study where there was 21 countries involved in this study. And of the 21 countries, only 7 of them had the right results that they were looking at or looking for. So they threw out all the other countries and they focused on the 7 countries where they saw that weight came down with fat. But when you really dissect that study, they actually decreased sugar consumption, and they gave fat the credit for that. And so there was born this whole fat-free era. And it was one of the worst things that we could do for our health. Going fat-free really wrecks our hormones. Our hormones are made from fat. The very first building block of estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, DHEA, even, all of those things is cholesterol, which is fat. And our brains are made of fat. I think it's like 80% of our brain is fat. And so depriving your body of fat is one of the worst things that you could do. And even saturated fat is good for you. And don't worry, I know we still get this idea, when you go to your cardiologist, they will tell you that you need to decrease fat if your cholesterol is high. But if you've listened to me in Thyroid Thursdays, you know that 80% of your cholesterol is made by the body and only 20% is influenced by what you eat. But fat doesn't make you fat. sugar is what really makes you fat, right? When you eat sugar, it raises your cholesterol. The other thing that raises cholesterol is a liver issue, a blood sugar issue, or a thyroid issue. And so remember, we always have to go back to root cause, right? So if we have high cholesterol, why do we have that? What system is breaking down? I can assure you it's probably not because you're eating too much fat. Now, we'll get into fat a little bit, but fat, there are good fats and there are bad fats. And so the good fats we should be consuming, and the bad fats we really should avoid like the plague, because those do influence our cardiovascular health and our whole body, and it creates tons and tons of inflammation, and especially in the brain. So there are good fats and there are bad fats, but it's probably the opposite of what we've been told. All right. So now, as we get into these foods that we are going to work to understand, it's first important for you to understand big industry, and the big food industry is all about marketing, right? And it's how much food can they sell, how much profit can they make, and really it has not a whole lot to do about your health. All right. And just because the USDA says something is healthy or something is safe to be consumed doesn't necessarily mean that, because they don't really test a lot of these things. And a lot of the foods that we have here in the US that have been deemed safe to consume are completely banned in Europe. So I want you to use your thinking brain. And if it looks too good to be true, then it probably is. And if it's a dead food, like if it didn't come from the ground, if there's not ingredients in there that are alive, then you really should not consume them. But these food companies are brainwashing you. They know that your subconscious mind makes decisions on the things that you think and the pictures that you see. Right? So they're going to paint the pictures for you. They are going to beat you to the punch. They're going to create this amazing picture for you, which is going to make it extremely difficult for you to turn down that thought process. So I want you to think about this. Think about the food process, the food companies that will make an advertisement about heaven, people sitting on clouds in heaven, eating Dove ice cream bars. I don't know if that's a commercial, but it's kind of what I had in my head. Or they use the word divine, they use the word dreams, and they have celebrations, right? So they're eating these foods when they're celebrating, or there's a hero that's eating these, or celebrities are eating these foods. They use words like sun-kissed. They use words like sunny delight. So they're painting pictures in your mind so that they almost surpass the conscious mind to get right into the subconscious mind, so that you go and you make that decision without even thinking about it. And so you have to create the pictures before the marketing companies do it for you, right? Before the food companies do it for you. They tell you that, their food's going to make you happy, like Happy Meals. And, once you pop, you can't stop. And they make kind of a joke out of that, but it is true. And the worse the food is for you, the more marketing and the more imagery they have to give you so that you will actually consume these foods. Now, did you know that when we eat fast food, these fast food companies put chemicals in their food so that the food breaks down in your mouth faster so that you can eat more of it in a shorter amount of time? How crazy is that? They put chemicals in the food, especially I think McDonald's puts a lot of this in their bread so that when you eat the bread, it starts breaking down really quick and you don't have to chew it. I want you to think about how much you have to chew an apple. How much do you have to chew broccoli or a steak compared to how fast you can eat a McDonald's hamburger and French fries? And the reason that is because they chemically alter the food so that it breaks down faster and it decreases your satiety factors, right? It decreases leptin and makes you want more. And so you have to start changing the pictures in your mind. And the more that you know, the more that it's easier to start changing that. Like, I would not eat McDonald's if that was the last thing on earth. I would find something else. I might eat dirt before I ate McDonald's because I know there's more nutrition in dirt. It won't taste as good, but I know the health impacts, and I know how much chemicals that they put in their food. It's not even food. You've seen those studies where, not even studies, those experiments where people have their McDonald's hamburgers for like 30 years later. It's insanity. These things don't break down over 30 years, not even sealed. And so you can imagine what nutritional value that they are bringing to your body. All right, so let's jump in. We're going to have 5 foods. These are 5 foods that you really need to be aware of. And I truly think if you take these out of your diet, then you will really start changing your health in a huge way. All right. And I want you to really understand also that when you start making these changes, we're going to work on the thoughts that we have behind it. We're going to get some education on why we're doing it, not just because Dr. Heather says it, but I also want you to understand that when you make these changes, you can't have certain set expectations on whether it's working or not, right? So like some women will say, I'm going to make these changes, and if I don't lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks, then it's a fail, right? Or you get discouraged. I talked to a lady today, and from the last masterclass, she started implementing these things. And she said, I lost 10 pounds in 2 months, but that's all I lost. I only lost 10 pounds in 2 months. I'm like, 10 pounds in 2 months, that's a lot, right? That's more than a pound a week. And you have to remember that what we're trying to accomplish here is improved health. And it doesn't always show itself on the scale right away or at the pace that you expected. And many of us have completely unrealistic expectations of how much weight we should lose and what time frame we should lose it. And then when those expectations aren't met, then we give up and we think that it didn't work. But you're going to be eating this way because you want to improve your health, because you don't want to have more autoimmune diseases, because you want to reverse diabetes or you want to prevent it. We've got to think in the long run, right? We can't think in the short run. So we have 5 foods that we're going to work on and that we're going to start with. So we're going to start with gluten first. All right, let me see where I'm at. Let me share my screen with you. Here we go. So what's with gluten all of a sudden? I had this conversation with a lady today, and it's like all of a sudden gluten is bad. Like, where did this come from? And I'm sure that many of you have heard that we should go gluten-free, and many of you have made fun of people for going gluten-free, and it's okay. It's okay. We all forgive you, because now you're going to really understand why and what it means to be gluten-free. So gluten is a protein that is found in wheat, right? And you will find it in anything that's made from wheat, like pasta and bread and pastries and flour. Gluten is also found in barley, rye, beer, malt, and it can be hidden in soups and sauces and salad dressings and seasonings and spices. You know, any soup that's made from a roux, like a lot of the green chili is made from a roux. Sorry, ladies, they use it to thicken it. Also, gumbo is made with a roux, and some of the crawfish etouffee. My husband is from Louisiana, so we have learned how to create these dishes without using gluten. So gluten is a protein found in all of those things. Now, gluten can cause or contribute to all of these different symptoms: depression, anxiety, arthritis, autism, inflammation, autoimmunity. I'm not going to read all of those things, but I want you to look at this second one where we're talking about weight gain, fatigue, joint and muscle pain, neuropathy, brain fog. So many of you have, I would say most of your symptoms that you're experiencing are probably on this list somewhere, right? Most of the symptoms that you're experiencing. Now let's talk about wheat and gluten and why we find ourselves where we're at today. So we went from a hunter-gatherer, Paleolithic era into an agriculturalist era, right? In the early 1900s, we started industrializing grains. We started replacing bacon and eggs with breakfast cereal. And we started to have so much malnutrition when we switched over to breakfast cereal that they actually had to start fortifying the cereal with vitamins and minerals, right? And so as this started to take hold, then we started to hybridize our wheat so that the stalks were heavier, the stalks were stronger, the stalks could be harvested by machines instead of by hand. They all harvested at the same time to make everything more efficient. And then we started getting into monocropping, and this was considered the Green Revolution. And this is where our government encouraged farmers to do one crop. They encouraged our farmers to do wheat. They encouraged our farmers to do corn or soy or rice. And so when you do monocropping, you make the crops weak and you make them unhealthy. Why? Because when you, if you're a gardener and you do organic gardening and you really get into organic gardening, there's a thing called companion planting. And we plant plants that go together that help with the nutrients in the soil, that help with balancing nitrogen and iron and magnesium and all of these things. We also do companion planting so that we will have some plants attract bugs and others that get saved from the bugs. We have trap plants, right? So trap plants would be like a plant where bugs like, but they stay off all the other plants. But when you move into monocropping, you don't have that. And you start depleting the soil with all of the nutrients because you only have one crop. And so because of that, not only are we losing all of our topsoil, and the soil that these crops are grown in is devoid of nutrients, so therefore the food is devoid of nutrients. You really start to have weak crops, so then you need fertilizers. You need all kinds of different chemicals to be able to make these crops viable, all right? So the other thing is that our government started subsidizing farmers for wheat, corn, soy, cotton, and rice, which means that they make sure that their crops get sold at a certain price. And when farmers maybe they had a drought and it wiped out all of the crops, well, the farmers could give the government could give the farmers money so that we still have a good food supply, right? Or if they have a surplus and they couldn't sell all of their wheat, well, our government buys it from them and stores it. All right. So this is encouraging farmers to grow wheat, corn, soy, cotton, and rice. And then we have all the chemical fertilizers. Here we have at least 10 applications of chemicals before processing it. And they put all kind of hormones and fertilizers and fumigants on there. And then one of them that is extremely toxic is glyphosate. And this is somewhat controversial, but not really. All of the studies that have not been done by Monsanto and Bayer, they really show that glyphosate is extremely toxic and carcinogenic. And that is why Monsanto is losing billions of dollars in lawsuits every single day. Now, glyphosate, let's look at this. Glyphosate is the chemical that is found in Roundup. Right? So when you go buy weed killer or you go buy Roundup, you're spraying glyphosate on those weeds. Now, this glyphosate can stay in the ground for up to 20 years. 20 years. And Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, is the same company that created Agent Orange in Vietnam. And Agent Orange, if you know, if you get exposed to Agent Orange, you have all kinds of side effects. And I have treated many, many diabetics who were exposed to Agent Orange, and it is known that it was because they were exposed to Roundup. Now, or sorry, Agent Orange. Now, this whole glyphosate, it disrupts your gut flora. It creates generational changes. So when your gut flora if your gut flora is messed up, right, because of glyphosate, and I'll tell you how that works in just a second. When you have a baby and you have a vaginal delivery, the baby's first breath is of all of your microbiome, right? All of that bacteria goes into the baby. And now the baby's microbiome is all messed up. And this just keeps going generationally. Now, this whole thing with glyphosate, they will argue that glyphosate only impacts the shigamate pathway. And the shigamate pathway is only found in bacteria. And they said it doesn't impact humans, it only impacts bacteria because humans don't have the shigamate pathway. But the interesting thing that they are not considering, or maybe they're refusing to consider, is that in the human body, we actually have more bacteria than we have human cells. I want you to think about that. There's more bacteria in the human body than you actually have as human cells. And so the health of your bacteria and your microbiome, your health depends on the health of your bacteria. And so when we eat this, when we come into contact with this glyphosate, it is disrupting the bacteria in our gut, right? It is completely disrupting that shigamate pathway that we don't have, but it is in all of the microbiome. It is in all of the bacteria that you have in your body. Now, this glyphosate destroys the bacteria that create your neurotransmitters. And when we think about neurotransmitters, we think about brain health, right? We think about mental health. We think about depression and anxiety and bipolar and schizophrenia. And we always think that's a mental disease, mental health. But 90% of your neurotransmitters are made in your gut. This is a gut issue, not necessarily a mental health issue. We feel like it's our mental health because we're not thinking correctly. But those neurotransmitters, 90% of them are made in the gut. So is folate and vitamin K. Now, the most common neurotransmitters is acetylcholine, dopamine, GABA, kind of makes you feel calm, glutamate, histamine, norepinephrine, serotonin. All of those things are made by 90% in the gut. Think about how many of you are on serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? SSRIs for depression, because you need to increase your serotonin or decrease its half-life. All right. So let's keep going with this whole gluten thing. So not only does it have glyphosate and all these chemicals and all these hormones on it, there's actually sugar in wheat. And it's a molecule called fructan, and it gets converted into fructose. And fructose, when it ends in the gut, it gets stored as fat. And when you have too much fructose in the gut, it then goes to the liver and it causes high LDL and a fatty liver. And I cannot tell you how many of you ladies actually have fatty liver. And that's where your liver cells are dying off and they're turning into fat. And this can eventually lead to non-alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver. There is no drug for that. We have to fix this before it becomes a problem. All right. So even if you have fatty liver in a functional medicine model, you can stop the progression of that. But in traditional medicine, they just wait and they just watch it and they hope you outlive the fact that you may need a liver transplant. All right. And then IBS is essentially a fructose malabsorption issue. I think I made the comment yesterday that IBS is one of the easiest things to fix, even though so many of you have been suffering for so long. But IBS is very easy to fix. Why? Because you got to get down to the root cause and you have to figure out what's causing the IBS. And once you have that data, you just implement. All right. Now, gluten is actually, we are making modifications to our DNA. And what that means is, with the study of epigenetics, we know that our genes turn on and turn off based on our lifestyle, based on the environment that they're exposed to. And so we are turning genes on that maybe we don't want turned on. We are turning autoimmune genes on that we'd rather have off. And so you can actually control, and you have so much impact over which genes are expressing themselves, over which genes are turning on and turning off. So that's why it doesn't necessarily matter that your family history, like everybody had diabetes. That doesn't mean you're going to have diabetes, because we can change the environment that your cells are exposed to so that these disease processes either turn off or don't ever turn on. And then I already talked about your microbiome is transferred and passed down to future generations. Now, gluten or gliadin, it causes leaky gut. All right, because when you eat gluten, it causes inflammation. And leaky gut means, like in your gut, in your intestines, we have our cells that are super tight junctions. These cells are butted up against each other so that only the smallest little amino acids can pass through. But the more inflammation we have, the more gluten that you consume. These tiny, tight junctions become loose, and larger molecules that haven't been broken down yet start to pass through those junctions. And then the immune system gets all flared up, and then we have autoimmune issues turning on. And then when you do a food sensitivity panel, out of 300 foods, you can't eat 280. You're like, how is this even possible? So gluten really causes leaky gut. And there's so many autoimmune issues that are related to gluten. And I just want you to see here, we don't have time to go through all of those, but there's gluten immune complexes, right? So when you eat gluten, it causes an immune issue in the brain. Yes, I said the brain. This causes major inflammation in the brain. It can cause skin issues with rashes and eczema. It can cause gut issues, joints, right, where your immune system is attacking these parts of your body, heart inflammation. The nervous system is the most affected. And I can pretty much assure you, if you have brain fog, you probably have a gluten issue. There's over 100 different autoimmune diseases related to gluten. 17% of Americans have celiac disease. And it is suspected that 100% of Americans have a gluten sensitivity because of the way that we process and produce our wheat. 100% of us, because we have messed up our food supply. All right, so the antibodies to gluten can circulate up to 90 days. I hate to break it to you, ladies, but you can't try to go gluten-free. You can't kind of be gluten-free. You can't mostly be gluten-free, just like you can't kind of be pregnant. All right, so either you're gluten-free or you're not. That there's no in between, because when you eat a bite of gluten, it can circulate up in your body. Those antibodies will circulate in your system for up to 90 days or longer. That's 3 months. So if you're really good all day, all week, right? Monday through Friday, you're amazing. And then on Saturday, you just got to have a beer. Then you have antibodies floating around for 90 days again. You're really good on Monday through Friday, and then you just got to have a hamburger and you eat that bun or that sandwich. So you never actually know if you start to feel better by getting up gluten, because you never really gave up gluten, or you never really eliminated it and got it out of your system. So, I have people say all the time, like, oh, I gave up gluten and I didn't feel any different. And so then I probe a little bit, and really they didn't give it up completely. And when I do the testing, I can still see antibodies in their system. So I know for sure that they didn't. And so you got to understand and know that being gluten-free means that you have no gluten ever. And when you do have even a bite, those antibodies stay circulating for 3 months or longer. All right. So intolerance to gluten and a leaky gut are all likely, or they are likely part of all autoimmune diseases. So if you have Hashimoto's, which it's likely, then it's probably due to gluten and a leaky gut. or at least part of it that's involved. Now, in the Journal of Neurology, there was a study done, and the conclusion was gluten sensitivity can be primarily and at times exclusively a neurological disease. So this is really, really important because gluten is causing so much inflammation and damage to the brain, and we wonder why cognitive decline, dementia, and Alzheimer's are at all-time highs. And guess what? It's amongst the female population. Now, there is a way to do gluten-free and there is a way not to do gluten-free. All right. So the way to not do gluten-free is to go, okay, I'll go gluten-free, because today it's really easy to go gluten-free because you can go to any grocery store, King Soopers, HEB, Whole Foods, buy Natural Grocers, Sprouts, and you can go down the aisles and there are hundreds of products that are gluten-free. And I have patients that say, I went gluten-free and I felt no different. And as a matter of fact, I went gluten-free and I gained weight. And I probe a little bit and I say, well, tell me what it looks like when you went gluten-free. Well, I just, I did everything the same. I did gluten-free pasta and gluten-free bread and gluten-free cookies and all of these things. But what we're forgetting is that these products, first of all, are packaged. They are not alive. They are full of sugar, and they're full of the grains that actually turn into sugar. So we can make the argument that some of these products are actually worse for you than the real deal, right? So it's very, very, very important that you don't fall for the marketing or fall for some of these products thinking that you'll just go gluten-free by substituting something that's gluten-free, and then you eat all of these gluten-free grains, because it does make you gain weight. So what's the solution? Is you have to go grain-free, right? So when you eat these grains, bread, pasta, rice, corn, potatoes, oats, millet, amaranth, rye, quinoa, barley, sorghum, and farro, they spike your blood sugar. So they raise your blood sugar, you have an insulin surge, and it gets stored as fat. So it's extremely important that you realize going gluten-free is not enough. You really need to go grain-free if you are going to make a huge difference in the way that you feel, if you're going to get a difference in your weight, if you're going to get a difference in your autoimmune condition. You actually should be going grain-free. All right. So that does mean, like, if you're looking at products, you want to go more paleo or more keto, but you've got to read the labels, because this is all a big marketing thing now, and it doesn't mean that it's healthy. So you have to read the labels. All right. Now here's some references for all of the information here. And I do really, really encourage you to watch the movie What's with Wheat. And that is a documentary on Amazon Prime. And then you've got Grain Brain by Dr. Perlmutter and Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis. So these are very, very, very helpful references, and they will go even deeper than what I did. I want you to think about what your brain is telling you. I want you to think about what your subconscious mind is telling you. I want you to remember that it doesn't like change. So what is it that it's saying? How is it freaking out? And how can you change the way that you're positioning things so that it knows that you are trying to live longer and trying to be happier and healthier? What can you change in your brain so that your subconscious mind cooperates and it doesn't sabotage your effort?